Welcome to our daily reflection for this Monday, May 27th. And as often is the case, if we read the readings in light of each other, they shed light, they become mutually interpretive, so to speak. And so in the Gospel reading today, Jesus is talking to the rich young man, and he asked the question, the young man, how do I find eternal life? Right? That's a great question. And that question about how do we get to the goal, which is eternal life, is a question that then illuminates the reading from 1 Peter. And so if we think about that, he begins with a great benediction and prayer, and then he says that this inheritance, which is salvation, is kept for you in heaven. And then the question is, how do we get there? How do we get to that final salvation? And then Peter says, we have to, even if it's for a little while, we have to suffer various trials. So part of the answer then for the rich young man is, how do I get to eternal life? You have to be willing to suffer certain trials. And that means that the genuineness of your faith will be tested, but it'll be purified like gold that's refined in the fire, as Peter uses that imagery, in order that we may prove our love for God, right? And that's what's going on with the rich young man. And of course, Jesus tells him, you lack one thing, because he lists a group of the commandments from the 10 Commandments that he has obeyed from his youth. Notice that he mentions what's known as the second tablet, the justice we owe neighbor. He doesn't mention the first tablet, which is the love of God above all else, honoring God's name, and keeping holy the Sabbath. All those three things that relate to what we owe God. And so Jesus says you lack one thing. And what is that one thing? Well, it's the love of God. And then he says, go sell your possessions, give it to the poor, and come follow me. In other words, Jesus' invitation is, you have all these possessions, which gives you all kinds of responsibility to manage all your estates. Go sell those so that you're free to follow me. In other words, if you want to fulfill the first commandment, which is love of God, follow me, Jesus says. In other words, Jesus is saying he is God, if the rich young man has ears to hear. But in order to follow God in that particular vocation, he's got to let go of all his possessions. And he leaves Jesus sad because it's a trial. It's a trial for his heart. Can he be detached from these possessions so that he can become attached to God? And that's in a sense what Peter is saying here. We're going to suffer trials in our life, trials in which we have to do the will of God and follow in faith what God asks of us, which means sometimes denying ourselves, taking up our cross, and following God. And in other words, sometimes to follow God requires sacrifice. Are we willing to make that sacrifice? And so the question in our meditation today is, what is God asking us to offer up in sacrifice that we may cleave and be closer to him and to follow him more freely? That is a good question. May the Lord bless and keep you.
This daily reflection is brought to you thanks to the generous support of the Mission Circle. Join the Mission Circle to help Catholics worldwide understand, live, and share their faith. Sign up at missioncircle.org today.